Welcome to our return to the Rainbow Studio. Here is part of the YAHOWAH blog. I'm your host, Craig Winn, and this handsome fellow, here he is, the Wookiee. We are about to begin a new chapter as part of our series exposing and condemning Paul, Christianity, and the Christian New Testament. We could, of course, play fetch with Wookiee. I think that would please him no end. It is one of the most thankless jobs on earth to reveal to people that their religion has no credibility. And in the case of Christianity, it doesn't. Paul was an utter nincompoop. He flunked every facet of logic. He constantly contradicted himself. He was egomaniacal. He literally a psychopath in terms of his nature. He is the person who invented Jesus. Christians don't know that because Eusebius and under Constantine's authorization reordered the New Testament and conceived these gospels that are presented in front of Paul's letters. And yet the first two of them, in fact, first three of them, are all the gospel according to Paul. First, Mark and Luke were Paul's pals. They were Paul's attachés. They traveled with him. And in Acts, we even read that Paul wanted Mark brought to him because he knew he could use him to create this gospel, and he did. And Luke, of course, mostly copied Mark, who was not an eyewitness to anything, and most certainly wasn't inspired by God. And then he added a bunch of fables, almost bringing in pagan myths of Odysseus and Dionysus to spice up the result in Grecian style. Then you have Matthew, which was written, well, Mark and Luke were written around 75 CE in Rome, 10 years after Paul's death. Matthew wasn't written until 95 CE, again by somebody who had no contact whatsoever with the events in 33 CE. It is a book of nothing but plagiarism. It plagiarizes almost 80% of Mark and Luke, and then adds from the Ebonim. Then the Ebonim were Jews who wrote in Hebrew, and they are the ones who supplied both the Sermon on the Mount and the Olivet Discourse, and they were actually recording David, not the mythical Jesus. And so those books were put in front of the 14 letters of Paul. There's also the book of John. We have no idea who wrote it. It was also written in 95 CE. It was written someplace in around Ephesus and modern day Turkey. Again, no credibility to the book at all. There's no basis for believing that it was written by a quasi disciple, and no proof of its validity. Plus the fact, you're dealing with something that was written at least, 6 decades after the events took place. It's absurd. I mean, if you think that there was a disciple named John, no J, by the way, until the 17th century, but be that as it may, there was a disciple named John telling the life of a Jesus. Again, the first time that Jesus's name is even written is in the 17th century, that waited 6 decades, 60 years before he would jot down anything that was said, and then he would do so by translating all Hebrew conversations into Greek 3 generations after these events took place in a country far removed from Yehuda. I mean, if you think that is the case and provide absolute no evidence of authorship, then you're out of your mind. But, that's what the religious are. And you have to then deal with the fact that there isn't even a copy of it for another 100 years after that fact. And that the most quoted story, let he who was out without sin cast the first stone with the adulterous woman, that whole story, that didn't actually appear until the 8th century. The 8th century. And so this is just ludicrous to believe that the Gospels are eyewitness accounts of a life of a person named Jesus, because there was no Jesus in first century Yehuda, which was the name of the Roman province. None. And not only wasn't there a person named Jesus, not only is Christ a Greek title and not a Hebrew one, almost everything that is claimed about said Jesus was stolen from Dowd and is contrary to what God said about Dowd. To believe that Jesus is a God and that Jesus is the Messiah and Jesus is the Son of God and that Jesus is your Savior, you have to call God a liar. Not my opinion. That's just an irrefutable fact. Read the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. In the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, it is absolutely clear, according to God, that Dowd David is the former and returning king, that Dowd David is our Savior, that Dowd David is the chosen one, that he is the Messiah, that he is the Son of God. And to claim otherwise is to call God a liar. And how in the world do you create a religion that is predicated on calling God a liar? And you have 2.5 people that believe that rot. But that was the rot that Paul brought upon the world starting in 52 CE. The first 14 books of the Christian New Testament were all written by him. And he was among the most nefarious fellows who ever lived. In the second letter he wrote to Corinth, he even admitted that he was demon-possessed. Read it. Deal with it. In his conversion experience, he can't keep his story straight. The single most important moment of his life, allegedly, and he can't keep it straight. He has 3 entirely different versions of what took place. How can it be the inerrant word of God when the words themselves are contradictory? The whole thing is pure and utter nonsense. If there was a Jesus, can you please tell me, or a Christ, or a church, or a Christian, or a cross, or a Trinity, or a Christmas, or an Easter, all of the essential things of Christianity, including Sunday worship, why isn't there a single reference anywhere in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms to Jesus, to Christ, to church, to Christian, to Christianity, to a cross, to Christmas, to Easter, to a Trinity, to any of these things? Not one word. There's no reference to a New Testament. There's no reference to a gospel. There's no reference to baptism. And all of the references to Paul by his given name, Sha'uwl, condemn him as the plague of death. And you want to say that this is a religion inspired by God? I know the Christians will say the entire Old Testament, it serves as the collective prophecy pointing to the arrival of Jesus Christ. No, it doesn't. I mean, to believe that, you're saying, I am really stupid. I am ignorant as hell. I believe any lie that I'm told because my lies make me feel good. There isn't a single reference. Prove me wrong. I'll give you $1 billion if you can prove me wrong. There isn't a single reference to Jesus in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. There is no reference to a Christ in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. There's no reference to Christianity. There's no reference to a church. There's no reference to a Trinity. None of this. It's all a lie. And that lie was perpetrated primarily by one man, Paul. And we are considering his first letter, a letter which Yahweh, through the prophet Habakkuk, 666 years before Paul would scribe it, told us that Paul was the plague of death. So, do you believe God or do you believe Paul? God says Dowd, David, is the Messiah, the chosen one, the returning and former king, our Savior. And Paul says it's Jesus. Now, there's a lot of proof that Yahweh was right and that that Dowd existed. There is no proof that Jesus ever existed. Who do you think is telling you the truth? Paul or God? And by the way, you can't win this argument, because if Paul's right, then God's wrong. But Paul claims that he was authorized by the God who he is calling a liar. I mean, think it through, people. It's obvious that the Christian New Testament is a complete and utter fraud. Now, why is it that after all of this time, I'm the first person to be this blunt with you on this and say he made up Jesus? Jesus is nothing but a crude counterfeit. He is the product of identity theft. Paul stole the nature, personality of Jesus from three individuals. Dowd, the primary one. Dowd is the Messiah. Dowd is the chosen one. Dowd is the Son of God. Dowd is the one who was crucified in his second of three lives to fulfill Passover. Primarily Dowd. That's why Paul begins in Acts by telling us Dowd is dead and buried, excluded from heaven. The reason he says that is because he must steal every prophecy that pertains to Dowd, because there are no prophecies of Jesus, and he knows it. So all he can do to create the illusion that there were prophecies pertaining to Jesus is steal the ones that were pertaining to Dowd, David. And if you're a rabbi or you are a practitioner of Judaism and you're hearing these words, what in the hell is wrong with you? Why did it take a goy after 2,000 years to figure this out and tell it to you when it should be obvious? The prophecies were revealed in your language. They were revealed by fellow Jews. And they're obvious. And it's life and death for your people. The Holocaust would not have happened had you confronted this lie. In fact, if rabbis had not trained Paul to do what he did, to misappropriate the word of God, to erase Yahweh's name, and to misrepresent him, Christianity and the New Testament would never exist. And if rabbis had stood up at this time and said, you know, Dowd as Gabriel, God's most courageous and capable man, told us through Daniel, way back in 555 BCE, the very day he would arrive as the Messiah to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim. He told us in the 22nd Psalm how he would be crucified in his fulfillment of Passover. He told us that his soul, Nephesh, would carry our guilt into Sheol to enable the benefits of Matzah, leading to Bakurim. And he told us all of that 1,000 years before he endured it. And then there's no Christianity. There's no Jesus. The lie is never promulgated. Rome doesn't have a license to destroy Israel again. There is no Bar Kokhba uprising. There is no Rabbi Akiba creating Judaism as a way of holding off the diabolical nature of Paul's religion. None of it happens. None of it. All of this hell that has been unleashed upon you in the last 2,000 years is because you didn't confront evil and you actually aided and abetted it. You can go so far with the rabbis of also acknowledging, which I prove in the series called Goddamn Religion, that rabbis sold their Talmud stories to Muhammad to make the Quran seem like a religious book. And without them selling those Talmud stories to Muhammad, the Quran doesn't exist. Islam is not a religion. No one's ever heard of Allah or Muhammad. And all of the terror, the hundreds of millions of lives that have been lost over the last 14 centuries don't happen had the rabbis not done that. They are your worst enemy. And Paul was the first person to call himself a rabbi. So every bit of it's a lie. The first 14 books of the Christian New Testament were authored by one man, the man who admitted that he was demon-possessed, the man who broke every rational fallacy there is, the man who constantly contradicted himself, the man who contradicted God while claiming he spoke for God. And guess what? This buffoon who claims that he was the lone authorization of his imaginary Iousu Christou, Jesus Christ. Oh, really? Then I'm sure he was the one who introduced us to the great sayings of Iousu Christou, then, wasn't he? Are you aware that he never once quoted him?
Not once.
Never once. It is so utterly stupid to believe that God chose this repulsive man, Paul, to contradict everything he had said and authorized him as the lone agent to the world after speaking through 40 prophets and telling the exact opposite message. He said, oh, well, this idiot here will have him contradict everything. Sure. Oh, and then I'm going to believe that this Iousu Christou, there is zero evidence that he ever existed, none, that this Iousu Christou also authorized him when he never once cites a single word from him. You know why he doesn't quote anything from Gospel Jesus? Because Gospel Jesus wouldn't exist until 10 years after he was dead. That's why. The first two Gospels were written 10 years after Paul's death. Couldn't quote him. He didn't exist. Oh my, what a horrible web of deceit Christianity is woven upon. And all the while, Christians claim to be, that's my God. Oh, my God's going to come get you. If you're speaking against my God, then you're an evil man. You must be Satan. Okay, come on, idiots. God is not a man. If your God is so small that he is a man, you got one really weak, puny, ridiculous, comical God. God cannot be killed by men that you claim yours was. And your solution is bodily resurrection, which is going the wrong direction. What you have to do is get rid of these physical bodies. If you are going to become immortal, if you're going to become liberated, enlightened, enabled, empowered, so that you can leave this planet and go to the spiritual realm, you have to get rid of these physical bodies. You don't go from death back into a body. It is pagan. It is absurd. It's ludicrous. You got nothing. Really, you got nothing. Give it up. Stop parroting the lies. Accept the truth. How many times did Paul write that he was speaking for Yahweh?
0. He doesn't even use Yahweh's name.
Is there any book that is inspired by Yahweh who happens to be God, and that's his one and only name, that is actually inspired by Yahweh?
The Towrah?
Every book that is inspired by Yahweh contains Yahweh's name. There's not a single mention of Yahweh's name in the Christian New Testament.
No.
So guess who didn't inspire it?
Yahweh didn't inspire it.
There you go.
Took 2,000 years for somebody to even question it. And when they finally questioned it, that's where you popped in.
It is pathetic. Now, if you want verification of everything I'm sharing with you, go check out the 5 volumes of Twistianity. They are free in their entirety at YadaYahowah.com. No one has ever read those 5 volumes to remain a Christian. It's impossible.
I don't know how you get through the first volume and still.
I'm not even sure you can get through the first chapter of the first volume and remain a Christian. But it's for damn sure you can't get through the 5 volumes and remain a Christian. The evidence brought against Christianity is undeniable. It is overwhelming. And you're welcome. You're welcome, really. I know that Christians say, oh, you're hateful, you're terrible, you're satanic, you're demonic, you're an idiot. I know more about your religion than any of you do. I know more about Paul. I know more about the God that he claimed that he spoke for than any of you do. I've written 35 books translating the oldest manuscripts, the Dead Sea Scrolls, in an amplified fashion, and explaining what God told us. And I compared it to what is in the Christian New Testament, and they never match. They're always oil and water. They're the opposites of one another. They're the antithesis of one another. That's how I prove that the New Testament isn't true. I set its claims next to what God said. And every time that a New Testament author cites something from the Torah and prophets, they always pull it out of context. They always truncate it. They always misrepresent it. And they always draw the opposite conclusion from it that the statement actually revealed. Not some of the time, all of the time. It was exceedingly easy to disprove the New Testament. And I did it 1,000 times over in those books. You can take advantage of what I have discovered and save yourself from it, because at the end of your life, you will find you completely wasted it if you believed in the lies of Christianity, or you can ignore it. That's your choice. But if you promote it, you need to know there's a hell of a consequence associated with that. And that consequence is a assured trip to Sheol. Paul absolutely, unequivocally, is in the place that is synonymous with his name. Sha'uwl is Sheol. So although the words Paulos selected, taken on their own merits, provide convincing proof that the scheme he was proposing was entirely nefarious, since the accusation that I am continually leveling against him would make him the most revolting, despicable, appalling man in all of human history, well, at least up to Trump. I would like to share something germane from this man's 6th letter, the one that he wrote to the Romans. It is appropriate. And the reason I say up to the point of Trump, there's been a lot of people since Paul that were horrible. Up to this point, Paul has been the man most hated by God. The second would be Muhammad, but Paul is the man most hated by God, based upon what he says in the prophets, based upon his claims, based upon what he's done to the Jewish people. There are others that God despises. Rabbi Akiva, Maimonides are example of people he hates. Hadrian, Titus, Vespasian, all examples of people God hates. Eusebius would make that list. He is the one who authored most of the means of taking these dishonest accounts and hearsay and weaving them together in a collective whole and augmenting them and then putting them under the political influence of imperial Rome to create the Roman Catholic Church. So Eusebius, he's going to be up there amongst the most nefarious people hated by God. And there have been, a lot of people since that time. Genghis Khan, Tamerlane would be examples of that. Clearly, Mao Zedong, Stalin, Hitler. But the single most hated individual by God is the one that is manifest before our eyes right now, Donald Trump. Donald Trump is Satan incarnate. He is going to do more that is harmful to the world than anyone before him. And I have proven that Donald Trump is the person that Christians have searched for as the Antichrist. There was no Christ, so I don't know how you can be Antichrist, but certainly Trump is anti-Messiah because Dowd is the Messiah and he is opposed to everything that Dowd represents. So the title seems to fit nonetheless. And it's interesting that we're going to go right now to the Romans, the letter that Paul wrote to the Romans, which is his magnus opus. And that is because in it, he makes the claim that is the antithesis of God's claim. And Samuel, when the judge who became the prophet, Sha'uwl, he was Dowd's contemporary. When he was guiding the people of Israel did what they did best. They revolted. And that's something they do regularly. And they wanted to have a Goyim style king. They wanted to be ruled over by a Goyim in terms of the kingship. They wanted to follow in the ways of the Goy, and they chose Sha'uwl, who is the prototype for the Sha'uwl that wrote the Christian New Testament. And so Sha'uwl, or Shamuel, comes to Yahweh and said, I have let you down. I have failed you. I'm trying to guide the people as a shafat, as a judge, one exercising good judgment. And they have chosen to reject what I'm doing and to choose a king in the style of the Gentiles. Then Yahweh says, no, they haven't rejected you. They're rejecting me. My people are rejecting me. They've been doing it ever since they were conceived as Yisrael, going back, to Abraham and Yishak and Jacob, and thereafter, particularly during the Exodus, where they were completely obnoxious. But it is interesting because, of course, not only did Yahweh at that time give us 12 reasons that we should not be political. God is exceedingly anti-political. He told Shamuel to tell the Israelites that by choosing a king in the style of Gentile nations to rule over them, these are the 12 things that are going to happen to you, and they're all horrible. And it talks about them doing the very things that we see Donald Trump doing now. Getting a group of people around him that he bribes and who bribe him, and that they work as a collective whole to advance der Führer's, the leader's agenda. And it's done entirely through dishonesty and bribes. Then he says he's going to steal your sons and is going to use them for war because he wants to covet what belongs to others, a la Donald Trump. He then says he's going to tax you. Take Trump's tariffs, for example, and take from you your wealth because he wants it. Then it says that he will use what he steals from you and your productivity to build ever more war machines. And then he will use your sons to drive them. And it goes on, talking about what human governance brings. And it describes what we're witnessing today, and we've witnessed all through human civilized history. So that's a way of introducing Romans, because it says the opposite of what God says. It's one of the reasons you can say for certain that Paul did not speak for God. So he was speaking either for himself or for another spirit. And since he acknowledges the spirit that he was speaking for in the final chapter of 2 Corinthians, being Satan, it's not hard to figure out how he came up with this notion. So in this particular discussion, it begins in clever fashion, although in an arrogant and condescending manner. It deploys the logical fallacy known as the straw man. Before I share it, it's important that you know that the Torah provides very few instructions regarding marriage, because that's the straw man he's going to base this on. It reveals that men and women come together and they do so to bear and raise children. There is no description of marriage in the Torah. There is no marriage vows in the Torah. There's no tokens of a marriage like a ceremony or a ring in the Torah. There is no until death do we part in the Torah. Matter of fact, the Torah says if you don't like each other, you write a letter and you're separated and it's all done. Just write a letter. Say, I'm not happy with you anymore, and it's over. Go away. So God's got no issue with divorce. Spiritual divorce, religious divorce, different story. Religious adultery, that's not good. God has nothing to say about promiscuity or sexual relations in or out of marriage, because there is no definition of marriage, nor does he give two hoots whether or not you have one spouse or 10 spouses. Doesn't care.
Those are the things that the religious are obsessed about.
That is correct. That is all a religious concoction, largely as a result of the imposition of Christianity. So it reveals that men and women simply come together to bear and raise children. That's our purpose if we wish to be married. I speak of Leah as my wife, not because of some ceremony, not because of some ring, not because of some vows, but because we are together as a family. We live together as what you would describe as husband and wife. We love one another, and we have built this home together, and we work cooperatively together as part of Yahweh's covenant family, and our children happen to be members of the covenant family. Now, while it speaks, Yahweh does in the Torah, about adultery, it is not in the sense of having more than one wife or husband. It is instead that God does not want us to be whoring around with false gods. Further, while the Torah speaks against incest, pedophilia, rape, bestiality, and prostitution, it does not say anything about sex outside of marriage. So there is some guidance regarding a woman's menstrual period, and it's because of her health, both mental health and because it can be a little bit of a crabby period, and not the woman's fault. It's just a little separation during that period, a little kindness in that regard is probably a good thing. He says, you go to your tent, he stays in his tent during that period. And you don't want the blood going. I don't want to go back into the physiological issues here, but God gives some wise advice. And it is, he says also, you must be compassionate to a slave woman. You cannot treat a woman like she is just a sex object for you to rape. As for divorce, as I mentioned, it is simple as writing a letter and separating. The lone rule regarding divorce says that a woman remarries and divorces again, the first husband cannot have her back. Beyond this, there is a non-binding recommendation on how a man can assist his brother's widow in the case of a childless marriage. Now, against that backdrop, ShaulPaul opined, or alternatively, are you presently ignorant, brothers? Knowing and understanding then the Torah, he's claiming to be an expert on the Torah. He's not. I say that the Torah is like a lord and master ruling over the man for however long and to whatever degree that he lives. This is Paul's theme. The Torah is a cruel taskmaster. It's a lord, it's a master. What's amazing, of course, is he will call his man god a lord. Doesn't seem the conflict in that. Using the same word, by the way, by derivation of kurios. So he'll call his mythical God-man a lord. But when it comes to the Torah, Lord is bad. When it comes to his mythical God-man, Lord is good. Now, I would call that a fallacy or hypocrisy or whatever you want to call it. But anyway, his idea is that Torah bad because it lords over people. What he's inferring is that the Torah is a book of laws. But if you read God's definition of Torah, he says it's based upon the verb yara. Yara does not mean law. Doesn't mean laws. It means guidance, teaching, inspection, and instructions and directions. Those aren't laws. The Torah is not comprised of laws. It does not lord over. In fact, you know how many Hebrew words there are for obey?
Zero.
Not a single Hebrew word for obey. The word that is rendered obey in your Bible is shama, and it means to listen. Sorry. So he has misrepresented the Torah from the onset. The Torah is a means of teaching and guiding us. Now, what Yahweh says about the Torah is that you either will observe my Torah and capitalize on what I am teaching and guiding you in my Torah, or you're not going to live. It is the source of life. He gave you a life. You can choose to ignore the Torah. You can do what Paul did and demean the Torah. But if you do so, then you have squandered the gifts of the Torah, which are the covenant and the ability to live beyond your mortal existence and enter God's presence. So if you forego that, if you speak against the plan that God has articulated that will reconcile our relationship, make us immortal, not guilty, adopted into his covenant family, enriched and empowered through the covenant, the Bereth, through the Moedim, the restoring witnesses to the eternal testimony and these annual appointments, should you capitalize upon them, you will live forever. And you are liberated. The very first thing that God says on the first item that he etched on the first tablet of stone is that he's a liberator. The first thing he says about when he returns and there are no more religious people on the planet, that he will never have to hear the title Lord again. He hates it. Yahweh is a liberator. He is not a master or oppressor. Yahweh is the father to the covenant family. He is not a Lord. Torah is not to be obeyed. It is to be observed. It is to be listened to. It provides instructions. So Paul's premise is that the Torah is like the Lord and Master ruling over the man for however long and whatever degree he lives. Wrong. Just flat out wrong. Romans 7:1. This is called a straw man. He has created a mythical construct that isn't true. And from the false creation, he's then going to present an argument. That means that the argument is fallacious no matter what he says from this point on, because he has erected a straw man. Now, the Romans were hardly ignorant, but since they knew almost nothing about the Torah, they were susceptible to what may be one of the most twisted and disingenuous arguments ever perpetrated. Here, Paul is claiming that he is an expert on the Torah, telling the Romans that he knows and understands it. And I am assured, absolutely for certain, that Paul did not. But rather than revealing what it actually says, Paul speaks of the Torah being akin to a Lord and Master. That would be the antithesis of what God says in the first statement he etched in stone. So, for Paul to be right, God lied. If God lied, Paul cannot be right. Really that simple. There is no way with this argument that Christianity prevails. The straw man, however, bears no correlation with the truth. There is no association between the Torah teaching and guidance and the mannerisms of Satan, who is the Lord. Moreover, the Torah emasculates the children of the covenant. Emancipates, not emancipates, that is to free. It liberates the children of the Torah from slavery, from being oppressed by the human religious and political institution. The very core of the Torah is, it begins in Bereshit, Genesis, talking about the events of creation, which, by the way, are exceedingly accurate, including the 6 days, because from the perspective of a creator at the point of creation, 6 24-hour days is 14 billion years. They are one and the same. You can do the math. I've done it for you. In the beginning book of YadaYahowah, the first book of the YadaYahowah series. Then it goes into the conditions experienced in the garden. I've done a series of shows on them recently. I've written 2 books on that subject here recently. We're writing the second one, but have published the first. One of the great lessons that can be learned about the purpose of our life here is in the garden story. It then progresses from there and talks about the flood, which is a story that I have detailed and to a great extent, showing scientifically that it happened exactly when and where God said, with a with an upwelling of deep seawater, and I've traced the Burkle impact crater incident all the way up through Mesopotamia, through the area of the Black Sea, and then out through the Bosphorus Straits, at the time that God says that it took place, and for the reason that he said it took place. And then we go to the story that dominates the rest of the book of Bereshit, the first book of the covenant, which is the narrative on the covenant, which I have written 3 books to explain the terms and conditions of the covenant, should you wish to know them. But as we go to the rest of the Torah, it is all a single story. From the book of Shemot, which means names, it's been corrupted to Exodus, to Leviticus, which is actually Kara, it means to call out, from Debatim, which has been changed to Numbers, and to Debatim, which means words, which has been corrupted to Deuteronomy. The entire story is the story of the Exodus, of Yahweh liberating his people from Mitzrayim and bringing them to the promised land, and all of the lessons that we can learn along the way. So the entire Torah is based upon telling the story of what happened in the garden, how Noach and the 8 around him, including himself, were saved by following Yahweh's instructions during the flood, why the flood even occurred, and the narrative that brings us back to the garden and to a relationship with Yahweh through the covenant, the Bereth, through his relationship with Abraham and Sarah. That's the Bereshit, and from there, everything revolves around Yahweh introducing himself to Moshe, them going into Mitzrayim, liberating the children of Israel from the mastery and lordship of the Pharaoh, and then directing them to the promised land. There are no laws, none. It's all about liberation. So Paul's straw man is the antithesis of what's true. So it is a liberating document from our Heavenly Father. He does not function, nor does it function as a Lord. Further, it's a thing, a written message. The Torah cannot oppress. It's Yahweh's revelation to us. So it's a thing. It's a book. A book doesn't oppress. So he is creating this straw man by turning the Torah into a person. Torah is not a person. It's words on a page. You can listen to them. You can learn from them. You can act upon them. You can benefit from them. Or you can repudiate them. That's your choice. But the Torah is not a person. It is not a Lord. It's a presentation of words. Therefore, Paul's premise is wholly invalid. Any conclusion drawn from a false premise is totally and completely worthless. Had this been an actual debate, Paul would have lost already around anyone who is informed, rational, and understands the rules of rhetoric. Now, informed, rational people who understand the rules of rhetoric are about 1 in a million today. Undaunted by the truth, Sha'uwl Paul continued to reveal why Yahweh called him the plague of death, which he did in the book of Habakkuk. To explain, Paul wrote, under the male, a woman, to a living man is bound, restricted, and imprisoned in the Torah. No, she's not. Now, Paul's, this is the nature of a hypocrite. Paul wrote that men lord over their wives. So in the New Testament that Paul wrote, this is true, that women live in subjugation to men in Paul's writings. In the Torah, there's no such thing. There is no subjugation or lording over women in the Torah. Women have the same rights that men do. So this is an absolute lie. Religions oppress women. And they do so because religions are promoted by getting men to go along with them. And men like to oppress women. Well, the kind of men that will, act like ice, like to oppress women. Some of them will even call you a bitch and shoot you to your face. Yep.
How far we've fallen.
Oh, how far we have fallen. So the fact is that this is a second lie. The male does not have, as a living man, does not have a woman bound to him. There are no restrictions in marriage. There is no marriage vows. There is nothing in the Torah that would bind a woman to a man. There is in the Talmud. There is in the New Testament, and there sure as hell is all over the Quran. Those are religious documents. In the Torah, no restrictions, no being bound, no imprisonment in the Torah or to the man. None. It's the second statement after the straw man fallacy is completely fraudulent. The opposite of what's true. Now, this is the way I went about disproving Paul and the Christian New Testament. There is no argument that can be made against what I have just shared with you, other than, well, I don't like it, so you're a meanie, so I'm going to call you Satan. That argument's called ad hominem. And sometimes they will go to argumentum by distraction, which is another fallacy that, okay, we'll change the subject and I'll pick on another issue and then I'll disprove that issue. And then they'll say, well, we'll switch off that issue and we'll go to another issue. It's like swatting mosquitoes in a nudist colony. It doesn't do you any good. But if the man should die, it provides release from the Torah of the man. Huh? I mean, this is so badly written. You begin with a straw man that is the antithesis of what's true, with the Torah being getting amorphosized and personified, such that it's a Lord and with human intent, the opposite of what the Torah is. And then we have, according to Paul, a woman being bound to and controlled by a man in the Torah so long as he lives, when there is nothing of the sort. Nothing. It is a complete and utter lie. And then we go to, but if a man who should die, it provides release from the Torah of the man. The Torah is not of the man. And the death of a man doesn't provide release from that which you are not bound. The Torah doesn't bind anyone. You can listen to it and act upon it, or you can reject it. Those are your choices. You can ignore it, you can reject it, you can come to know it and act upon it. They have three options with the Torah. But none of those options with the Torah creates a release from it upon death. You're not released from the Torah upon death because the Torah doesn't control you in life. It provides directions for you in life. If you follow those directions, you will have a release from your physical body and a release from death, but you won't die because of the Torah. Now, you can inflict not so much death as eternal separation from God based upon what the Torah says. If you are like Paul and you contradict the Torah, if you demean the Torah, if you misrepresent the Torah and therefore lead people to their demise, become a spiritual murderer like Paul was, then there is a consequence of doing that, and the very instructions of the Torah will cause your soul to be sent to Sheol forever. That's what's happened with Paul. Now, there is no binding to the Torah. You either observe it, you neglect it, or you oppose it. If you're a Christian, if you're a Muslim, if you're a practitioner of Judaism, you're opposing it. In Judaism, they revel in what the rabbis say, and in the Talmud, they dress the Torah up like a whore, and they don't want to admit that in the Torah, they're presented as obnoxious and that God hates religion. So it is religion that binds. And in this case, Paul is actually going to bind Christians to the edicts of their government. It's religion that binds. Religion is actually from the Latin word that means to rebind. So he is projecting his own faults on God's instructions. Now, if the Torah was this way, then God would be mean. Then God would be a liar. So why would anyone believe Paul if he says, which he did, that he was authorized by the God who was the meanie who lied? Because God says, if you observe and listen to his Torah instructions, you get to live with him forever. So why would anyone believe this? So anyway, I'll read this again, but if the man should die. Now, I'm translating this literally from the oldest extant text of Paul's letter. Every one of these words, and in the book, I also go so far as to provide 4 other translations, but this translation I'm reading to you has got each of the Greek words, so you can put them into a search word engine, verify them for yourself, and be certain that the translation is accurate, but it is an amplified translation based upon each word, and the order the words were laid out with a precisely accurate and literal definition. So he said, but if the man should die. Now, by the way, should die. If the man should die. Can you tell me a man that didn't die?
Dowd.
well, Enoch and Elijah were taken while still alive. But Dowd, in the end of his first life, he died.
Yeah.
Now his soul didn't, body did. So it is possible to have your soul live beyond the existence of your physical body, but everyone has a physical body that dies, with the exception of 2 individuals thus far were spared that, one of which will endure it going forward, which is Elijah, but that's another story. So if the man should die, okay, all men die. So why don't you just say, when the man dies? It provides release from the Torah of the man. There is no Torah of the man, and it does not provide release of anything. If the man dies, of course, the woman is released from the marriage, but there is no marriage contract. There's no specification of what marriage is in the Quran, in the Torah. None. So what is she released from? She's released from the man, but she's not released from the Torah of the man, because the Torah is not of the man, and the Torah has nothing to do with the 2 of them being together. Romans 7:2. Ironically, it is Paul's letters which subject, of course, women to men. The Torah says no such thing. So the preamble of Paul's argument is not only untrue, he knows that it is invalid. He knows that he's lying. Therefore, Paul was, as I would say, deceiving when he set up this argument to explain how he claims we have been released from the old written system of the Torah. But by considering his overture, we are witnessing just how devious and convoluted a misguided man's arguments can become. This is really the darkest side of humanity. This is like Satan having a conversation with Chahwah. That's what this is. As a result, then, according to the man living, an adulteress she will be considered, if she may come to be with another man.
That's a recipe for disaster. You're teaching people so contradictory statements.
As a result, then, when you say as a result, then, and so far you've postulated a straw man based upon that which isn't even remotely accurate, the opposite of what's true, and then you've made a false statement. You can't say as a result, then. You're leading from manure into a cesspool. According to the man living. Now, he just had the man die. So how can this be a logical argument if he's just had the man die, but now he's got the man living? An adulteress she is considered if she may come to be with another man. No. If her man were to die, she can be with another man. Absolutely, unequivocally. Why would Paul say the opposite of that? If her man were to die, she can be with a living man. Now, she can't be with a dead man. She can't be with her man that has died, because that would be necrophilia. Bad. Don't do that. But she can be with another man. So this is not true. Moreover, when Yahweh speaks of adultery, he is almost never speaking about sexual relations. He's using this concept of sexual relations because it's clear to us. It's a wonderful metaphor for us to grasp what he experiences when his people are disloyal to him and unfaithful to him. That's the whole story of Hosea, when Yahweh says, I want you to marry a religious prostitute, a religious whore, so that you understand the kind of infidelity that I have been dealing with all of this time, and why I'm divorcing myself of Israel because of their religious infidelity, not sexual infidelity. God's not having sex with these people. And so when he describes the consequence of adultery, he is speaking of cheating on him through religious gods. Anyway, so the result, and according with a man living, an adulteress she will become if she may come to be with another man. Absolutely false. If the man is dead, she can be with another man. But if the man might die, she is free from the Towrah. Her not being an adulteress may being with another man. Okay. I guess this is circular reasoning here. The man dies. She is free of the Towrah of the man. There is no Towrah of the man, and the Towrah does not control. So double fallacy there. But if the man lives, then she is an adulteress. But how would she be an adulteress if the man lived? Because he just said that the man dies. But now, if the man might die, then she is free. Well, she's not free of the Towrah. She's free of the man if he dies. She can be free of the man by divorcing him too if she wants to, but she is absolutely free of the man if he dies. Pretty straightforward on that one, pal. But she's not free of the Towrah if her man dies. The Towrah and her husband have no correlation. The Towrah is a book of words, of instructions from God. A husband is a person. The life or death of a husband has nothing to do with the ongoing validity of the words inspired by God to provide us guidance. These are unrelated things. You might as well be talking about garden slugs and stars in the sky. Completely unrelated. So this is an argument by delusion.
Now that makes sense.
She is not an adulteress if her man dies. Well, by the way, she may be, because who knows what she was doing before her man died. But the fact that he's dead does not make her one thing or another. And it has no correlation to the Torah. Okay, that was Romans 7:3. This is exhausting. Once again, after mischaracterizing the Torah, Paul is negating reason. The woman's relationship to the Torah is unchanged by her husband's life or her husband's death. If I were to die, for example, while my wife would be free of me, I don't think she would like that. I think we have a wonderful, loving relationship, but she would be free of me, at least until we meet again. But she would not be released from the American judicial system, unfortunately, either. Just put it in perspective. You know, we can go one step further. If someone were to try to kill me, good luck with that. But if someone were to try to kill me, they are not released from the U.S. Judicial system as it's reflected here in this territory in the U.S. Virgin Islands. You will be prosecuted for trying to kill me. So killing me does not release you from the law. And my death would not free my wife from being Torah observant. She was Torah observant before I met her. She's still Torah observant. She's more Torah observant. And my departure would not make her any less Torah observant. And the Torah liberates her. It doesn't constrain her. The Constitution of the United States is unaltered by my demise, as would be my widow's rights under it. Whatever rights she has in America upon my passing, she would retain. They don't go away because I'm gone. The only reason that the widow would not be considered an adulteress for being with another man is that she is no longer married. You aren't married if your husband died. Were you married? Yes. Are you married now? No. What is the definition of marriage in the Torah? Spending time with a man for the purpose of raising a family. So she's free of the man. So she's divorced, just like Yahweh divorced Israel. Pretty simple. He is pandering after being illogical. He is now pandering to the Romans he served. So as a result, we have another so as a result after this litany of fabrications. I tell you a lie. I tell you another lie. I tell you yet another lie. And as a result of my lies, so as a result, brothers. Of mine.
Okay.
Also, you were put to death. He's talking to the zombies. You were. The religion of this is, by the way, Paul's magnus opus. This is Paul's greatest letter, is the letter to the Romans.
And the religious spend thousands of hours trying
studying
to explain this.
Studying this letter. And here is Paul in the 13th chapter of his greatest letter, his letter to the Romans. And he's just telling you that you were put to death. Okay. You were put to death in the Torah. You were put to death in the Torah. The Romans don't even know the Torah. How can they have been put to death in the Torah? And if they were dead, they couldn't listen to it. You were put to death in the Torah by way of the body of the Christu. Okay, Christu never existed. Never. And the body of Christu is absolutely irrelevant. Now, the body of the Passover lamb, who happens to be David, the very Son of God and the actual Messiah, the Mashiach, not the Christo, served to fulfill Pesach by opening the doorway to life. Fulfilling Pesach, which Dowd did in 33 CE when he was crucified by the Romans, as he foretold in the 22nd Psalm. When he fulfilled Pesach, he was fulfilling the Torah. So you are not liberated from the Torah. Your soul is liberated from death because Dowd enabled the promise of the Torah when he offered his useless body that was a bashar, had no value other than to serve this purpose. He doesn't care about his body. He cares about his soul. God protected his soul. So the argument that is being made here is that a misnomer that robs Dowd of what he achieved is being credited for killing you through the Torah, through his body. Now, if in fact we're going to say that there was something done on a crucifixion, on Passover, first of all, it was by Dowd, but second of all, it does not kill you. It is the opposite of that. Rather than being put to death by the Torah through the fulfillment of Pesach, when the body of the sacrificial lamb dies, it does the opposite. It opens the doorway to life. The exact opposite of what Paul just said is true. If you are a Christian, throw away the New Testament now. Disown Paul. It is all based upon a lie. There was no Christo, there was a Dowd. He fulfilled Passover. By fulfilling Passover, he did not bring death. He brought life. That is the entire purpose. Passover opens the door of life. Simple. The children of Israel in Mitzrayim, when the Pharaoh would not release them after 9 plagues, Yahweh says, all right, I got one that'll work. You want to continue to play this game? I've got all day. No problem. We're going to have the lesson of Pesach. And the lesson of Pesach is, since you've tried to take the life of my firstborn, the children of Israel, my child, I will take the life of your firstborn. That'll be the lesson. So, children of Israel, if you observe the instructions that I'm providing you now on Pesach, and you do as I ask, and you make the sacrifice of the lamb, which, by the way, is a wonderful meal. You're going to have a lovely meal roasted over the fire. Enjoy the meal. And by the way, when the meal is over, incinerate the rest of it, because there is no bodily resurrection of the Passover lamb. The remains of the body are incinerated that night. So if your Passover lamb is bodily resurrected, he is not Torah observant. He's not fulfilling the Torah. He is a lie. Anyway, God says, do that. And guess what will happen? You'll live. You'll live. It's the doorway to life. It's the opposite of what Paul claimed. You were put to death in the Torah by way of the body of the Christo? No. When Dowd fulfilled Pesach, he opened the doorway to life. So every word of this is a lie. Unto you all become of another, to the dead, having been awakened and arising, in order to bear fruit of the God. I'll read that whole thing just without all of the interruptions, so that it's not me who sounds stupid, but Paul who sounds stupid, because I think that's fair. So as a result, brothers of mine, also you all were put to death in the Torah by way of the body of the Christu. Into you all become of another, to the dead, having been awakened and arising, in order to bear fruit of the God. So he is touting this notion that you bear fruit if you die, and that there is a bodily resurrection. No. If you die and you are a physical being again, you have destroyed any chance of ever being in God's presence, ever leaving this earth, ever being immortal, ever exploring the universe, any of it. And the fruit happens to be the fruit of the tree of knowledge and the fruit of the tree of lives. It's Yada who is the tree of knowledge. It is Dowd who is the tree of lives. And the ultimate fruit is what is delivered on Bakurim. Paul never mentioned matzah or Bakurim. Pesach, death of the body, which provides life, not death, to those who are observant, is only the first day of the 7 days of Chag Matzah. And it is on Matzah where Dowd's nephesh soul carried our guilt into Sha'uwl so that we could become first fruit on Bakurim, the very children of God. Shabuah, which Paul and Christians misappropriated as Pentecost and the birth of their God-forsaken church, is a harvest, and it is the second bearing of fruit. The third is on Towrah. Those are the 3 harvests. Those are the 3 times you bear fruit. And according to God, he has an Adamah Parah, which is a man who is the bloody man of the earth, who as a bull bears fruit. He has 3 Zeroah. Zeroah is from Zerah, seed, which are sown and cultivated to produce a productive harvest. Paul ain't one of them. You don't bear fruit by dying. You don't bear fruit by being separated from the Torah. Christu never existed. And Passover doesn't kill. It provides life. Everything wrong, once again. Now, this is a leap out of irrational ignorance into mind-numbing stupidity. There is no correlation between the widow's husband dying and the Romans being put to death. And while the Romans murdered hundreds of thousands of Torah-observant Jews, very few Romans were killed because of the Torah, and none in Paul's audience. Dowd's Bashar, corporeal body, serving as the Passover lamb, upheld and affirmed the Torah so that we might live. Therefore, to suggest that the fulfillment of Passover equates to the death of the Torah is a non sequitur. It does not follow. For when we were in the flesh, the suffering and misfortune of being evil, offensive, and errant was the result of the Torah operating and functioning in our bodies to bear the fruit of death.
That's self-contradictory.
You piece of worm rot. You disgusting reprobate. I despise Paul with every emotion and sense of intellect I can muster. He just said that the Torah kills. For you out there who believe that this man spoke for God, that he delivered the inerrant word of God, that he spoke for your God-man Jesus, You're out of your ever-loving minds. This is a reprobate. This is the plague of death. This is the most evil man who ever lived. He is absolutely lying to you, and it's easy to prove. Every word of this is untrue. And he is promoting Gnosticism. If you're not familiar with Gnosticism, you should be, because Pauline Christianity is based upon Gnostic doctrine. The Gnostics believed. Now, these are Greeks, and he's speaking to Romans and Greeks, and the Romans encapsulated most of Greek philosophy and religious notions. The Greek philosophers were all wrong in their pursuit, not only of pagan religious myths, and they all were wrapped up in pagan religious myths, but in their promotion of Gnosticism. It is synonymous with Greek philosophy. And Gnosticism, the real world is bad. The flesh, the real world, no, bad. There's an imaginary world out there that's good. So this spiritual world of make-believe, it's good. Real world, bad. Now, the reason that people who are empowered come up with that kind of lie is because they want to control you in the real world. And they say, okay, I know your life is miserable. It's just really terrible, but not to worry, because there's a world to come where it's going to be wonderful. That's the lie of Christianity. It's the lie of Islam. It's the lie of Judaism. It's the lie of religion. They want to control people in the here and now. They want to plunder them of their freedoms and their prosperity. And so they say, okay, yeah, that's your life in the physical realm is terrible, but got promises of a wonderful life to come. And people buy it. And that's Gnosticism. And the reason that Paul chose Gnosticism to pursue, not only because it would appeal to the Greeks and the Romans, because Paul hated circumcision. Circumcision is the sign of the covenant. If a man's not circumcised, he cannot participate in Passover. And if you can't participate in Passover, then your life ends when your life ends. There is no life after this life for any man that does not participate in Passover. But if you don't participate in matzah, which Paul never spoke of, and that's the more important of the 2 days, if you don't participate in matzah and accept what it represents, then you're still slathered with religious guilt, which means you now are immortal, but forever separated from God. And that place is called Sheol. It's a black hole akin to hell. That's what he's promoting here. So when we were in the flesh, what do you think he is now?
Still in the flesh.
Absolutely. Suffering and the misfortune of being evil, offensive, and errant. He is, by the way, still offensive, evil, and errant as a result of the Torah. Now, Paul would actually go as far as to say that I'm a sexual deviant, but I would not know that I was a sexual deviant if not for the Torah. So it's the Torah that makes me a sexual deviant. This is such a horrible man. And read again the conclusion of 2 Corinthians. That goad, that thorn in his side, it's a messenger, therefore a demon from Satan to control him. He admits it. He was demon possessed. He is evil. He is offensive. This is what God calls him throughout the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. Evil, offensive, errant, the father of lies. But he wants to blame being miserable, misfortunate, afflicted, uncontrolled, having uncontrolled impulses and sexual desires, being errant and misled, being sinful and wrong as a result of the Torah operating within us. If the Torah is those things, then God is one mean son of a bitch. Why? I guess he would be a bastard. I don't know. He can't be a bastard because he wasn't born. All right. He's meaner. If the Torah operating inside of us is meaner, then God has to be super meaner. Why? What did he write in the 31st chapter of Jeremiah? He was speaking to Yisrael and Yehudim. And he says, with Yisrael and Yehudim, I am going to, that would be Jews and Israel, not a church, not Goyim. He said, I'm going to renew and reaffirm my one and only covenant. I'm not going to create a new one. I'm going to restore and reaffirm it. And he then says that it won't be exactly like the experience during the Exodus when he says, I led you with a firm, uncompromising hand, resolute hand. That's the only difference. Why did God have to lead the children of Israel with a chazak yad? Because they were ignorant, they were religious, they were obnoxious, they didn't know Yahweh, they had no interest in him. He made a promise to Abraham that things would work out a certain way, and the only way for that to happen, since the children of Israel were experiencing genocide under Pharaoh, being worked to death, and they were the victims of apartheid and genocide there in Mitzrayim, they wouldn't even have existed. And so Yahweh liberated them, but he took them kicking and screaming with a firm hand, resolute, uncompromising. When he says, when I renew my Torah, the one difference will be, I'm not going to take you kicking and screaming. You're going to come of your own free will or not at all. And then what does he say he's going to do?
He's going to write his Torah in our hearts.
He's going to write his Torah inside of us. So Yahweh is on record. And the only place that even hints at a New Testament of saying that he's going to resolve the problem of man when he reaffirms his Torah and his covenant by writing his Torah inside of us. Now, wouldn't that just take you back to the opposite of what Paul claims? Paul's claim that I did a Torah-ectomy. I removed the Torah from you and you're healed. All we had to do is cut out the Torah like it was a cancer and you're healed. And Yahweh was saying, you're really sick, so I'm going to cure you by inserting my Torah inside of you. That's what Yahweh says. You can read it in the 31st chapter of Jeremiah. And this is what Paul says in the 13th chapter of his book to the Romans. They are the opposite. Paul is saying the Torah is the malignancy that you must have extracted from you to live. And God is saying the Torah is the remedy that when put into you will cause you to live. So I'm going to leave it there. We will return to this in our next program because I think it is one of the most interesting ways to show just how faulty, how irrational, how nasty the central book of the New Testament is. I mean, it's no book in the New Testament more important than Romans. And I want you to know just how offensive this book is to God, to our intelligence, to logic. And if you're a Christian, you have nothing to argue in favor of here. Everything Paul says is a lie. Everything you believe as a result of what Paul lied makes God a liar, if it were true. And by calling God a liar for saying that his Torah is the sickness that needs to be removed, as opposed to the cure of our sickness, then you have proven that you can't be trusted. And that is the case with Paul. He is the single most hated person in all of the human experience up to this very moment in time where Donald Trump is now surpassing Paul as the most reprehensible human to have ever lived. That is where we are. So I thank you for being here. I love being in the Rainbow Studio. I hope you've enjoyed this program. I know I get pretty animated here, but there's a good reason. Once you know the truth, and you know that 2.5 billion people have been beguiled into a horrible lie, and that it is exceedingly easy to disprove the lie, and that this lie isn't just an ordinary lie, like Trump saying, I'm going to solve the U.S. economy by imposing more tariffs, or Venezuela stole our oil, so I'm going to go take it back, or if we don't take Greenland, the Chinese and the Russians are going to take Greenland, or I'm going to turn Gaza into resorts, or I'm not in the Epstein files, it's all a hoax. We're not talking about a lie of that nature. What we're talking about here is corrupting what Yahweh said about his beloved son, Dowd, and what Dowd accomplished by lies that not only preclude people from benefiting from Dowd's sacrifice, but that annul God's testimony to humanity, such that for thousands of years, no one benefited from anything God had to say. That's quite a lie. That's Christianity. Thank you for listening.